remember being called a conspiracy theorist for entertaining the possibility that COVID-19 came from a lab. The COVIDians on Twitter would attack anyone who spoke out against the established narrative. This is why arguing with the conspiracy theorists rarely goes well. It gives the person advancing the theory to keep repeating it as just a hypothesis, as Cotton does here. Every time you ask him, he'll repeat it, say it's unlikely, and then say he's just asking questions. They would say that all the time, man. They talk like that. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You can't ask questions. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. That's why you're asking questions. And Tom Cotton is a senator who is adamantly pushing for investigations into the origin of COVID. So, going against the narrative. I remember my old channel getting, a misinformation strike from YouTube because we mentioned that doctors and scientists are starting to come out and say the lab leak theory might have some truth behind it. I was pissed when we got there. I was like, we're not even saying that it happened. It's just like, we're just saying, hey, we're just showing you some tweets from some doctors. That's it. We're not saying that that it happened. And they're not even saying that it happened. They're just saying, hey, this kind of looks weird. I remember Dr. Anthony the Science Fauci saying back in 2020 in an article by National Geographic that there was no scientific evidence that the coronavirus was made in a Chinese lab. Fauci. No scientific evidence that the coronavirus is made in a Chinese lab. Tony Fauci has become the scientific face of America's COVID-19 response, and he says the best evidence shows the virus behind the pandemic was not made in a lab in China. Fauci, the director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, shot down this discussion that has been raging among politicians and pundits, calling it a circular argument, a conversation Monday with National Geographic. If you look at the evolution of the virus in bats and what's out there now, the scientific evidence is very, very strongly leaning toward this could not have been artificially or deliberately manipulated. Everything about the stepwise evolution over time strongly indicates that this virus evolved in nature and then jumped species, Fauci says. Based on scientific evidence, he also doesn't entertain an alternative theory that someone found the coronavirus in the wild, brought it to a lab, and then accidentally escaped. Okay. Time always tells. And I think we've reached that point in the timeline where they can no longer deny the lab leak theory. Lab leak, most likely origin of COVID-19 pandemic. Energy Department now says. The U.S. Energy Department has concluded that the COVID pandemic most likely arose from a laboratory leak, according to a classified intelligence report recently provided to the White House and key members of Congress. The shift by the Energy Department, which previously was undecided on how the virus emerged, is noted in an update to the 2021 document by the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines' office. The new report highlights how different parts of the intelligence community have arrived at disparate judgments about the pandemic's origin. The Energy Department now joins the Federal Bureau of Investigation in saying that the virus likely spread via mishap at a Chinese laboratory. I don't trust the FBI as far as I can throw them. But I'll take a bone when I can get one. And the fact that they're saying that they think it's possible that it leaked from a lab is the move in the right direction. I think, And what I find funny is there was so much evidence that pointed to a lab leak and people just ignored it. You know, the former CDC director came out on CNN this time last year and said he believed COVID came from a lab in China.
If I was to guess, this virus started transmitting somewhere in September, October in Wuhan.
September, October.
That's my own view. It's an only opinion. I'm allowed to have opinions now. I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory. Escaped. Other people don't believe that. That's fine. Science will eventually figure it out. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in a laboratory to infect a laboratory worker.
Exactly. Exactly. There's nothing conspiratorial about it. It's a possibility that it happened that way, right? But of course, after that interview, you had people like Keith Olbermann come out and call him a quack. We are allowed to have opinions. Among Redfield's previous opinions were that a useless vaccine for AIDS was accurately a cure, and that he could just make up data about the disease and publish it. My opinion, Robert Redfield is a quack. CNN should not give him a platform. Fucking Keith Olbermann. Fuck Christ, dude. Yes, Keith. No, dismiss everything he said because his HIV vaccine didn't work out. Yeah, that's the way to do it, bud. Fucking, I hate him so much. Oh, no. But there was also something that came out that pointed towards this might be a lab leak. That was the Fauci emails that were released under the Freedom of Information Act. No, which showed that Fauci was aware that this might have started from a lab and it might have been engineered. So this is a report from the Congressional Oversight Committee requesting an interview with Fauci so he could explain why there were emails that date back to January of 2020 warning him that COVID had leaked from Wuhan, possibly in a lab, and that the virus could have been genetically mutated. So let's kind of read a couple paragraphs out of this here. So we write to request a transcribed interview of Dr. Anthony Fauci, Director, U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. Excerpts of emails we are making public today reveal that Dr. Fauci was warned of two things. One, the potential that COVID-19 leaked from the Wuhan Institute Virology, WIV, and two, the possibility that the virus was intentionally genetically manipulated. It is imperative we investigate if this information was conveyed to the rest of the government and whether this information would have changed the U.S. response to the pandemic. Scroll down here a little bit. By January 27, 2020, Dr. Fauci knew NIAID had funded EcoHealth. The WIV was a sub-guarantee of EcoHealth, and EcoHealth was not in compliance with its grant reporting. In particular, a grant that the NIAID knew had gain-of-function potential and novel bat coronavirus. It is unclear if Dr. Fauci reported any of these issues to his superiors. We need to know the entirety of what Dr. Fauci knew and when he knew it. On February 1st, 2020, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Collins, and at least 11 other scientists convened a conference call to discuss COVID-19. It was on this conference call with Drs. Fauci and Collins were first warned that COVID-19 may have leaked from the WIV and further may have been intentionally genetically manipulated. Again, it is unclear if either Dr. Fauci or Dr. Collins even passed these warnings along to the government officials or if they simply ignored them. Only 3 days later, on February 4th, 2020, 4 participants of the conference call authored a paper entitled The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2 and sent a draft to Dr. Fauci and Collins. Why? Prior to final publication in Nature Medicine, the paper was sent to Dr. Fauci for editing and approval. It is unclear what, if any, new evidence was presented or if the underlying science changed in that short period of time. But after speaking with doctors Fauci and Collins, the authors abandoned their belief COVID-19 was the result of a laboratory leak. It is also unclear if doctors Fauci or Collins edited the paper prior to publication. Of course, they did. On April 16th, 2020, more than 2 months after the original conference call, Dr. Collins emailed Dr. Fauci expressing dismay that Nature Medicine article, which they saw prior to publication and were given the opportunity to edit, did not squash the lab leak hypothesis, and asks if the NIH can do more to put down the lab leak hypothesis. The next day, after Dr. Collins explicitly asked for more public pressure, Dr. Fauci cited the Nature Medicine paper from the White House podium, likely in an effort to further stifle the hypothesis COVID-19 leaked from the WIV. So he cited at a conference to kind of, further say, hey, these are all conspiracy theorists, a paper that he possibly edited. He did edit it. Let's be real here. Let's be real here. No, and those emails that they're citing from were released back in 2021. Now, nobody wanted to talk about them. Now, Rand Paul questioned Fauci about these emails, and the media brushed it off like Rand Paul was a right-wing conspiracy nut.
With him. In an email exchange with Dr. Collins, you conspire, and I quote here directly from the email, to create a quick and devastating published takedown of 3 prominent epidemiologists from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. Apparently, there's a lot of fringe epidemiologists at Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. And you quote in the email that they, or from Dr. Collins, and you agree that they are fringe. And immediately there's this takedown effort. A published takedown, though, doesn't exactly conjure up the image of a dispassionate scientist. Instead of engaging them on the merits, you and Dr. Collins sought to smear them as fringe and take them down. And not in journals, in lay press. This is not only antithetical to the scientific method, it's the epitome of cheap politics, and it's reprehensible, Dr. Fauci. Do you really think it's appropriate to use your $420,000 salary to attack scientists that disagree with you?
The email you're referring to was an email of Dr. Collins to me. If you look at the email
That you responded to and hurried up and said, I can do it. We got something
Exactly.
in Wired magazine.
No. I think in usual
Nature
fashion,
magazine, buddy. But
Senator, you are distorting everything about me.
Did you
First
ever
of all,
object to Dr. Collins' characterization of them as fringe? Did you write back to Dr. Collins and say, no, they're not fringe, they're esteemed
It's all there in
scientists.
the
It would
emails,
be
too.
beneath me
That
I
he's
did not.
lying.
You responded
He
to him
has
that
the
you would
emails
do
in
it.
his hand.
And you immediately got an article in Wired and you sent it back to him and said, hey, look, I've got him. I nailed him in Wired of all scientific
That's not
publications.
Nature.
You
There
did.
you
Nature
go
medicine.
again.
That was
Just
your
the
response.
same
Okay.
thing every year.
That was your response. And
So-
this wasn't the only time. So your desire to take
You're
down
absolutely
people.
incorrect. As usual, Senator, you are incorrect almost everything you
Well,
say.
no, you deny.
I love
you
their
deny
fucking
that the emails tell the
bickering,
truth of
dude.
this.
No.
It's
This
fucking.
wasn't the only time.
It's
Your desire to
entertaining.
take down those who disagree with you didn't stop with Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. You conspired with Peter Daszak, who you communicated with privately, and other members of the scientific community that wrote opinion pieces for Nature. 5 of them signed a paper for Nature, an opinion piece. 17 signed a paper that called it conspiracy theory, the idea that the virus could have originated in the lab. Do you think words like conspiracy theory should be in a scientific paper?
Senator, I never used that word when I was referring to it. You're distorting virtually everything.
Did
No,
you
he's not.
communicate
He
with
has
the
the
5
fucking
scientists who
emails
wrote
right
the
there in his
opinion piece
hand,
in
dude.
Nature, where they were describing, there's no way this could have come
That was
from the
not
lab.
me. What I
Did you
did.
talk with any of those
See,
scientists
but
privately?
you keep distorting
you?
the truth. It is
Did
stunning how
did
you
you
do.
talk to any of the scientists privately
Yes.
who wrote the opinion? You did.
Well-
What were they telling you privately?
Well, let me explain. You know, you're going back to that original discussion when I brought together a group of people to look at every possibility with an open mind. So
Yeah,
not
but
only are you
before that,
distorting
you
it,
were fucking,
you're
you knew that
completely
this
turning
might
it
have happened in
around.
the
Were
fucking
most of the
Wuhan,
scientists
man.
that came to
I
you
hate them so
privately,
much.
did they
There's
come to you
emails
privately
that
and say,
show
no way
this.
this came from the lab? Or was their initial impression, Dr. Gary and others that were involved, was their initial impression actually that it looked very suspicious for a virus that came from a lab?
Senator, we are here at a committee to look at a virus now that has killed almost 900,000 people. And the purpose of the committee was to try and get things out, how we can help to get the American public. And you keep coming back to personal attacks on me that have absolutely no relevance to reality.
Do you think anybody
Okay,
has had...
we can keep on watching that. I love it, but time's sake here. Fauci the victim. That's what he's doing, man. He's victimizing himself, and that's what he ends up doing towards the end of that clip. Is he just victimizes himself? He answers nothing about the emails, and just like tells Senator Paul that he's just spreading lies, which he's not. He's fucking citing straight from the fucking emails, and they have emails that what we got were redacted. They don't have the redacted emails. They have the full fucking emails there. At that time, we got the unredacted emails now because what Congress is doing right now. But that Fauci, basically in the rest of that interview, he makes a scapegoat of himself and says these allegations are leading to his possible harm and the harm of his family. And that's why you shouldn't believe Senator Paul. Not because he has actual shit there, it's because he's harming me. He's harming the science. I'm the science. Fucking, oh man, dude. And the media, seeing a narrative painted right before them, no, they just run with it, fully knowing that these emails Rand Paul is citing from exist. Fauci fires back at Rand Paul, accusing him of using attacks for political gain. And that was written by the Washington Post. TPM, Fauci scolds Paul again as KY senator pushes COVID origin conspiracy theory. CNN, Fauci exposes Rand Paul's true motivations. Slate, the Fauci boogeyman. Republican candidates are increasingly endorsing a conspiracy theory that links the public health officials to an ominous history with COVID-19. NPR. Dr. Fauci says GOP Senator Paul's false accusations have sparked death threats. The victim. What a moron. From Vanity Fair. Anthony Fauci lets it rip on the entire country's behalf. Okay. It's insane, man. The propaganda train. That's what that was. The propaganda train. Now, and with all that evidence out there at that time, people still think the lab leak conspiracy is a conspiracy and that Anthony the Science Fauci is the God King that saved America from a disaster that could have been worse. Even though the evidence is starting to show that Fauci exacerbated this situation. And if you're like me and you're feeling optimistic about the government, finally coming forward and confirming the lab leak theory, and that we will finally get to the bottom of the origins of COVID, don't hold your breath, because they're already trying to debunk those entities. Lab leak. Intelligence reports aren't scientific conclusions. Intelligence reports supporting the lab leak theory for COVID are not based in science. Fuck. Don't question the religion of science. And that ends the big lead.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media are true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.